today it's warm. We've been running the AC in here all day, so I'm hoping it's not horribly warm. But these speakers are going to be so interesting you won't notice any of it. The thing that I hear, the comment I hear probably more than any other thing in all of these years of running this gallery is how much people love the variety of work that we show. We hit as many mediums as possible. I like different styles of work, different approaches to work, all of that. And I think that's what makes it such a dynamic space. So tonight we have two contemporary photographers working in various different ways, creating images, and we have an extraordinarily accomplished pastel landscapist, I guess is the right word. And while you would look, the initial thing is you think, well, where's the connection in these two bodies of work? And for me, I'll just tell you, you'll find your own way. For me, it's that in all cases, there's a deeply rooted intention and observation. And then how you express that, what medium you choose, whatever, there's a quality in it that is stunning. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Bill Trevaskis, who volunteered to be number one.
Thank you, everyone. I only volunteered because I know it's the least desirable spot on the roster. Well, I really appreciate you all being here. This is an amazing packed house, so to speak. I'm going to stand and raise this up. My name is Bill Trevaskis. For those of you who don't know me, I am a teacher at the Vinyl Haven School as well during the school year, but I live on North Haven. So actually a lot of my work involves my commute, which can be pretty serene and lovely, and then also a giant beast. The commute that I take is just across a tiny body of water, which can, like I said, be very serene and calm, and then sometimes really angry and want to kill you. And I take that and I use that as inspiration sometimes. But I will say that a lot of the sort of angle that I like, I don't know if I do it intentionally, but it just kind of is the way I think. And I'll go to a quote from the great sound designer, Walter Murch, if you're familiar with film and film scoring. He does a lot of sound design. He does a lot of Foley arts he's done in the past. I mean, all these things that are very chaotic and unique and experimental. And his quote is, sound is the shadow sense. And I always found that interesting. The first time I ever read that in a book, I found it really interesting because he's using light to describe sound. And to me, it's just like all one spectrum, really. You're thinking about from everything, the shadows and the sun, to the frequency of my voice, right, as I changed my inflection. So all of these things, whether they're visible or not, also, why am I talking about sound at a visual art opening? Who knows? It's a good question, but that's just the angle I tend to take. I mean, I'm a sound designer, sort of as just that's kind of what I do for the most part. I also work with building instruments, and there's a little bit of a visual component of that. But for me, again, it's really about the spectrum of light and sound, and those are really chaotic things to work with. When you're photographing things, you're really trying to capture one singular instant. I think Cartier-Bresson called it the decisive moment. Actually, he didn't call it that. I think his publisher called it that. He hated that name, I believe. But it is really what you're trying to do. And when you're working in the medium of photography, even, which is my primary visual medium, you can take any kind of angle you want. And there's a lot of experimentation that goes into it for me. There's a lot of mistakes, which I actually love. I love mistakes. I love the chaos of working in sort of expired medium. I love the chaos of failure, and I try to impart that on my students sometimes who hate failure. They think it's the worst thing ever, and anytime there's a failure, I think, yay, and they're like, "What's wrong with you?" I like to fail, and I think it's an important thing as an artist, and probably every artist in this room could attest to that, because you learn something new from it, or you get an unexpected result. And for me, a lot of that's unexpected results, whether it's trying to just capture light or working in a medium after you've captured the light. I have some work in here I shoot a lot of expired film, but I also shoot with, old digi cameras that don't work quite well. I have a little developing tank that I use for, that I kind of took the little, wire wheels where you put your little 35mm film in it. Well, I kind of threw it on the ground a few times and stamped on it, and then I put my film in it, do the thing, and then hey, what happens? So it's a lot of experimentation, and I enjoy working in all medium. I recently sort of came back to shooting digitally, which I have some digital work. Actually sounds kind of funny. I came back to shooting digitally, which is actually the other way around. But I do have some digital work in here, and I thought, hey, I really don't want to present digital work just in a standard way. I want to do something different. So experimenting with different printing techniques and actually really compositional techniques. I do like to shoot fast. Like, I'm a fast shooter, so slowing down for me is really hard. And I took this year to really slow myself down, working in a sort of renewed medium for me, which is the digital medium. Spent most of the year shooting digitally just to sort of like slow myself down a little bit more. That tends to be part of the experimental process for me too. It's just going in a totally different angle, and I appreciate that because it's hard. It's like learning a new instrument. By the way, I'm talking a lot about sound. I'm sorry. Music. That's where I come from. I'm the music teacher at the school, so that's like my brain. And I try to think compositionally when I'm shooting, though, even if it's quick. Maybe it's improv. I don't know what you call it, but it's one of those things where, like, you might develop 35 images and 2 are great, 2 are okay, maybe none are okay. Maybe the whole roll is just junk and you throw it in the trash. Done that. Just did that a couple of weeks ago. But I do appreciate those moments probably more than like the finished product in a way. I think the process is really important to me. So yeah, that's my stuff.
Let's have Ken come up. Ken Banks is a brand new artist to this gallery. Yay! I'm super excited about that. And when all three have had a chance to speak, then if you have questions, we'll try to hang on to them for a few minutes in here before we all expire from the heat. Without further ado, Ken Banks.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
All right. So I am Ken Banks. If you happen to notice a group of 9 chairs just inside the gallery, those are mine. I want to talk a little bit about how I got into photography, talk about how I see myself as an artist, talk about my time here in Vinyl Haven, and then also talk about the chair itself. So 1977, I was lucky enough to go to the UK with my grandmother and her sister. It was the Queen's Silver Jubilee. And I decided I was going to document this trip, so I got some kind of an Instamatic camera. And honestly, the shots were just kind of shitty. A lot of thumbs, a lot of fingers, a lot of a Queen, like in a motorcade, 40 yards away, blurring by. But it got me into photography, and then when I went into high school, I bought a real 35mm camera. I think the idea was that I was going to be like a sports photographer, like I was going to go photograph the high school football team. I obviously was not on the football team. But I had, the kit lens is a 50mm lens, which is just terrible for sports, so that was out the door. And then kept that. It was a Fujica something or other, I don't know. Had that for a long time. And then had kids and kind of put the camera down for a little while. And then when I picked it back up, it was right around when digital photography was starting. And I was kind of against it, like sort of philosophically. And I thought it was kind of for hacks. So I went kind of the opposite direction, and like Bill started getting expired film. I would get slide film and have it processed as print film, and very similar to him. Like, it's the excitement of getting that roll of film back from the, so I've never developed my own, so getting that film back from the lab. And sometimes there's like one or two images that are just like, oh my God, like I did that. And other times, I mean, just again, like Bill, like a couple weeks ago, I got a roll back and there was absolutely nothing on it, like just no images, not even bad ones. And I also, the other thing I do, so I'll have, again, expired film, slide film, get it processed as print film, which gives you really kind of unusual, sometimes very saturated colors. And I also use toy cameras, which I'm happy to show anybody that wants to look at. So these are like cameras that were built in the like 60s. They've got plastic lenses. There's all sorts of light leaks, which you can actually see in some of those photos out there. And you just there's no real viewfinder that you can tell. So when I was taking photos of the chairs, and maybe I should skip to Vinyl Haven. So I came to Vinyl Haven 20 years ago to get married to an island having never been here and not knowing what I was getting into. And I remember my brother said, "Oh, Vinyl, you blue bloods," like, not. I'm sometimes scared for my life here. But started coming to Vinyl Haven 20 years ago, and there's a family camp on Roberts Harbor that we're here at least every year, and then sometimes we try to come out in the winter or the fall, and we now have a house here. But spent a lot of time at this family camp, which they all have a deck, and this deck had my late mother-in-law's favorite chair, which was this plasticky orange, kind of a hot mess. But it would cast these amazing shadows on the deck. So I just started taking photos, and I'm certain I've taken hundreds of photos of this chair, which is now gone thanks to that guy. So there won't be any more photos of this chair. And Jason is probably happy about that. But just took a ton of photos, and I never imagined that it would be a series. I mean, I never imagined I'd be in the gallery. But it came together, and really, when Elaine and I started talking about the idea of a show, and I sent her some of the chair, I said, "I've got this chair that I really like." And I sent her some of other parts. There's all sorts of places, obviously, to take photos here. And we both pretty quickly focused on the chair. And we didn't both, she did. I mean, I said I liked the chair idea, and I sent her a bunch of these photos, and she said, "Look, I like some of these other photos, but we're gonna do the chair." And so last thing I'll say is I posted something on Instagram, or no, my wife sent a text to a group that included my son, and he wanted to know why they were numbered randomly. And it's just, when I sent her the photos, I just put a number on each one. Like, this is photo number 1. So we could have conversations about which ones would be in the show, not knowing that she would be telling me which ones were in the show. I mean, I honestly would have appreciated a conversation. But so it's just whatever number happened to be on that photo was the number of the chair. I think we did an edition of 10. And that's it.
Poor Kathy has so much to learn about working with me. Okay, and Andrew comes from a really deep tradition in landscape art and is the most accomplished pastel artist I have personally ever encountered. And it's always, always a joy to have his work in the gallery. He's been showing here for 10 years, give or take, yeah. I still remember the first time he walked in, he came off the ferry carrying a box, came up to the gallery, put the box down, we started pulling them out, and the second one we pulled out sold as we were pulling it out of the box. And it's kind of been like that ever since.
Except for our unique way that we do it now in the thoroughfare.
Well, there's that. Yeah, Andrew is a North Haven connection, and so there's a lot of Andrew coming over in a boat with boxes of paintings, trying to keep them dry and safe, and me driving up and doing the swap.
On the float. We lay them out on the float. Right?
Oh my
Choose
God.
That's what she wants to take.
Yeah, we do. Anyway, but it works. So, Andrew Anderson Bell.
Hi. So I was thinking, while I was sitting on the bench over there, when I really first started doing art, and maybe when it was that I became a professional artist. And I'm thinking it was like when I was 6 years old over at North Haven exhibiting in the annual art show where I was raking in a dime or a nickel per painting in the kids section. And the subject matter back then is somewhat what it is today. It was islands in Maine, and that's always stuck with me. But it has been a circuitous path to get to where I am now. So I'd say maybe for the past 30 years, I've been working in the medium of pastel. And I formerly had training as a graphic designer and went off and did some graphic design work and ended up working for a corporation and quickly learned that that wasn't for me and was still thinking about, I want to be in the fine arts, but what is it? Graphic design is just not exactly what I think I should be doing. And I walked into an art gallery on Newbury Street in Boston, Massachusetts. I'm from Ipswich, Massachusetts. I was born and raised in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And I walked into this gallery, and as soon as I walked through the front door, I felt like I saw the signature piece of the show directly across the way from me. And it looked familiar to me. And I walked up to it and looked at the title, and the title simply said North Haven. And I started looking around at the rest of the show and realized that that particular painting, which was a pastel painting, was the only one of North Haven, and all the rest were, well, I should say the vast majority, were of rocky shoreline of Vinyl Haven. So, and I wasn't that familiar with pastel at the time, and I was just taken by this artist's work and the medium and how so much color was injected into the rocks and how much life was put into these still objects. And of course, it was a familiar terrain to me because since I was born, I've been coming up to North Haven Island every summer and exploring the islands in mid-coast Maine. So, having seen that show in Boston, I thought about pastel. Okay, what is this? Okay, this seems really like a very immediate medium. So, within a week, I had gone out, I purchased some pastels and some paper, and started experimenting in pastel. And didn't have any instruction for quite some time. But it is a very immediate medium. You just get some paper, get some pastels, and once you start buying some pastels, it becomes very, very addictive. I don't know if you've seen sets of pastels, but I've been to places where there's so many pastels to buy, they call these places candy stores. It's just so overwhelming. And you learn quickly that there's different types of pastels. There's hard pastels, medium pastels, soft pastels. Typically, you start out with the hard pastels as a sort of base color or blocking in, and you build up to the soft pastels, which are really super rich and creamy. And but in the course of learning about pastels, they're very addictive, and I think most pastel artists end up buying them by the thousands. And that's a bit of the joke about oil painters and watercolor painters have, who basically can get away with 3 tubes of paint. Right, the 3 primary colors, and so the joke is like, yeah, I used to try to work in pastel, but I could never find the right color. And you do have to get proficient in looking at how you've arranged your pastels to find that right color, because you've got a gazillion greens and blues and so on and so forth to choose from. But so I was drawn to pastel. I took up pastel. I've been working in that medium for close to 30 years. The subject matter, again, is lots of coastal Maine landscape, but it turned out that some of the other work that I saw in this show in Boston were of these marshes in Ipswich. I love marshes, and I went up to the title of one of the paintings, and it said Ipswich Marsh, and guess where I was living at the time? Ipswich, Massachusetts. So I thought, like, wow, what's going on here? Is this artist my soul? I've got to meet her. So anyway, I was so inspired by not only the medium, but her choice of subject matter, the marshes, and coastal Maine rocks, which, by the way, don't know if you know, Herbie probably knows. Rocks are hard to paint. They really are. But it's a lot. It can be fun. It can be challenging. You can, as some people work, and embrace the mistakes. I have a little bit of a mantra that is work for the waste paper basket. So whatever you make, think about it, just making it for the waste paper basket. And if it comes out that you think it doesn't need to go in the waste paper basket, that was a good day in the studio. And speaking of studio, as much as I like to go out and be a plein air painter, it is, and I like to, as I said before, I like to go out and explore these islands. I do so on a boat on a regular basis, but you got to schlep your gear, all those thousands of pastels, and your easel and paper and so on and so forth. But it's working out well in that I'm married, and we go out on a boating picnic. And then after we have our picnic, my wife goes and sunbathes and reads a book or 2, and I go off painting, and it's a very nice way to spend an afternoon. A lot of the time, however, I will take the work back into my studio and touch it up, because as you can imagine, if you're a plein air painter, you are chasing the light and chasing the shadows, and you can only do so much in a time frame. So you have to some of my work quickly and spontaneously, but you can always take it back to the studio. And I guess I have to admit, I'm a bit of a fair weather plein air painter. So in wintertime, I do my work in the studio. I do have a plethora of photographs of coastal Maine landscape to paint while there, and I've had some funny times where choosing subject matter. I became a new member of a gallery in Rockland, and on short notice, it was wintertime, and I was going to spend 2 months in Arizona that winter, and I was told I needed, a couple dozen paintings for in April for the gallery in Rockland. So there I am in Arizona painting coastal Maine landscape. So that about sums up what I've been doing in the world of pastel. If you have any questions about the pastel medium, I'd be happy to answer or attempt to answer your questions.
Who was the artist in the gallery?
Her name is Susan DeMichael, and she lived in Cohasset, Massachusetts, where is actually like somewhat considered Cohasset and Ipswich sister cities or towns because of the coastal characteristics and marshes, tidal marshes that they have. I bought her a couple of her paintings, the North Haven painting and the Ipswich Marsh painting, and years ago, when I became proficient in pastel and got gallery representation in Rockland, I brought my work up in July to the gallery for an August exhibition, dropped it off, went out to North Haven, hung out for a month, came back to see the show, and my work was hung next to Susan DeMichael's work. And we had not met. And I told the gallery director, wow, this is an incredible experience for me because she is my oblique mentor. I would not be doing what I'm doing if I hadn't been inspired by her work. The gallery director then said, well, because you have shared this with me, I must share something with you that is not common knowledge. Susan DeMichael is battling cancer, and I was given her contact information and was able to reach out to her, and she succumbed a few years thereafter. But it was nice to be able to have made that connection with her.
Do you fix your pastels, and if so, with what?
Yes, I do fix my pastels. You learn the hard way if you've
Well, it depends, everything sinks into the surface.
You have they call it a pastel trap. So the pastel, as you know, it can be smudged, it can be damaged, so it's under glass. But you want to keep the matte off of the pastel paint. So you actually have a little buffer in there. That's called a trap. So in theory, if any pastel pigment comes off of the painting, it falls behind the matte. And if you haven't fixed your pastel painting properly, you end up having to take apart the whole frame, take the painting out, clean off the mat, so on and so forth. So people use,
not fixing it.
but the people use fixative to keep it from flaking away like that. And so there's, Grumbacher and Sennelier make different pastel fixative sprays. Now,
So you use those?
I used to use them, and the theory was that it actually dulls the color of the pastel painting.
Yes.
But I was challenged to think, well, you must have a really discerning eye to be able to notice that, this is what I thought. So, but they needed to be fixed somehow. So I learned a trick that you could take newsprint paper, it's drawing 101 painting for drawing with charcoal. It's very rough paper, and you can lay it down over your pastel painting and burnish it, as long as that paper's not moving around, and burnish it, and any loose pastel pigment will either be ground down into the surface of the pastel paper or be raised up onto the paper that you just burnished. You also have a ghost image. And that's a way to fix it.
Alternative. I mean, because anytime you spray any kind of fluid material on it, all the pigment is going to just sink together, and it's like it's a different piece. Now, it creates a lot of fixatives will create another surface that you can then work back on, but then you're stuck with the same problem. Because
Right.
there's always fugitive stuff on the surface. I mean, for centuries, pastels have been very delicate, and just to protect them from glass is a touchy situation.
Right. And so for all of you that want to buy pastel paint, make sure it's framed nicely because you put it in the back of your car and then you'll drive down your bumpy driveway and you'll see a lot of pastel paint coming off your painting it.
Unless you buy it at a new art gallery,
Yeah.
I will tell you, carry this flat. Do not stand it up in the back of your car when you're driving up the North Haven Road, right?
And if we can get them across the thoroughfare without
Yes.
damage, then
Right. So, three really interesting is here, and if you have questions for Bill or Ken, now's your chance, although you can also just snag them. Bill is on a little bit of a schedule, he's also the sound designer for Matilda on North Haven, which is happening tonight. So we're especially lucky that he's here. So if you have questions for Bill, make sure you get them soon. And Ken, I hope is here, and Andrew's here. Are you going back?
I'm going back with Bill.
Okay.
But we're here for lunch.
Yeah, you're okay. All right. Immediate questions, Evita?
Yeah, this is for Bill. Since you're so interested in photography and sound, I'm curious why you didn't move into film or video.
It's a great question. It's not really a medium that I'm personally interested in. I do it sometimes if I'm asked to do it or hired to do it. But I think generally, I'm a lo-fi person. Like I like things to be not so much simple, but a little bit archaic in a way. And I'm like that with sound design too. Like I'm not a crisp type person. If you see work that's crisp of mine, it was probably an accident. Oops. But I think film, unless we're talking like old film, actual film, it's really not something that I've ever done too much of or have much experience. I have done some sound design work for films and for videos, and I've done a little bit of film scoring. Absolutely do not like it. I hate to admit. It's just one of those. It's one of those mediums that's really specific. If you're creating sound to a visual, and I do think there's something to be said in that. But the difference being, if I'm doing, for example, sound for a play, there is a lot that can go wrong with that, and for some reason that excites me. And it usually does go wrong. Anyway, that's my bad answer.
Thank you. Anybody else? So there is wine and snacks and things here, and wine and snacks and things in the upper gallery. Ken's work, which is hung as a grid, is entirely in the upper gallery. Most of Andrew's work is also there. Bill is in both places. So go on an exploration and find things and then find them and talk about them.
Can I just say one thing?
Yes.
So I've turned on digital. I'm not against it anymore. So I've got two digital cameras, and I sort of, when I travel, I often have one or two digital or one or two films. So I'm not as snobby as I might have sounded, but I am snobby.
You rely a lot on photographs to paint from,
I do, especially
especially the
winter.
lighting.
Right. Yeah. I've done a lot of sunsets or sunrises, and that would be something I would want to photograph because that's going to go by very quickly.
So do you just quickly take a photograph?
And if I'm, for a few sunrises, you can do a quick sketch to get down maybe some basic colors or something like that. But that's definitely something I would work back in the studio for photographs. Or, take it on your iPad, and take it on the computer, and work on that back in the studio.
Thank you, guys.